Starting tomorrow for 6 weeks, the council doesn't exist. You're it.
What happens when we must fend for ourselves?
What a mess.
Can a community work together?
You're passion killers, aren't these?
Or will the reality
Cuts means choices. We're broke.
be too much to bear?
This is the sort of people I live around. I'd rather move.
I just don't know who she thinks she is.
There'll be a community here that's indebted to such my job.
The street that cut everything. Monday at 9 on BBC One and BBC One HD.
Now, tonight's National Lottery results. The National Lottery Euro Millions winning numbers are confirmed as 3, 10, 15, 28, 45, and the two lucky stars are 5 and 7. Early indications show that there is one UK ticket winning over £148,000. The National Lottery UK Millionaire Raffle is confirmed as CSD 668173. One lucky ticket is worth a guaranteed £1 million. Kids remanded in custody. A shockingly real snippet of life in the lockup. Here at 11:25 on BBC One and BBC One HD.
Welcome to London, the libel capital of the world.
£600,000 in damages.
Where defending your name can take everything you own.
Worst case scenario is it goes away to trial and I don't sell the house. Where am I going to get 200 grand from in November?
This is the High Court, the end of the line when newspapers print or television says the unforgivable.
Hey, Uri, what's this thing with Michael Jackson? Is it true?
But there's a new area of law being argued in these courts, over our right to privacy.
They had no right to go into private premises and take pictures and films of adults engaged in activities which are no one's business but those of the people concerned.
People now sue when their privacy is breached.
Essentially, their reputation and privacy is being sort of cut up and sold in strips on tabloid websites and tabloid newspapers.
So see you in court may be the most expensive words a company or newspaper will ever hear. Tonight, two very different people take action against major companies that they say have infringed their privacy.
On the subject of who we can we call Rupert Murdoch?
George Galloway is suing the News of the World over claims that his mobile phone has been hacked into.
If they said to me, you can have £1 million, that might be tempting.
Model Danielle Lloyd is suing one of Britain's biggest phone retailers over private pictures stolen from her mobile phone.
Tried to sell explicit pictures. Well, explicit would mean to me like sexual ones.
I just want it to be over with now. They're my private pictures. I would never want them photographs to go out.
In 2006, there I was sitting in the Parliament building when a senior police officer from Scotland Yard called the office and said that he would like to come up and see me right there and then. He brought with him pretty astounding news, actually. He explained that the police had raided the private detective working for the News of the World and that they had discovered evidence that I should change my mobile telephone number, or at the very least change the PIN number on my voicemail, because it would appear that this private detective, Glenn Mulcair his name was, may well have been accessing my voicemail on my mobile telephone illegally. I was shocked and surprised. I had no idea, of course, of exactly what messages this Mulcair may well have been able to access.
George changed his mobile number and his PIN code and thought little about it until last year when phone hacking became front-page news.
And then I began to see these stories in the Evening Standard in March of 2010 that the News of the World paid Max Clifford £1 million to drop his phone tapping case. He refers also to Gordon Taylor, the Footballers' Union chief, who also signed a confidentiality agreement, reportedly in receipt of a very large sum of money. And I'm the third person to go into bat on this. I'm not interested in an out-of-court settlement, and I'm certainly not going to sign any confidentiality agreements, because my purpose in taking this legal action is that the truth should be out. I want to know who knew in News International, and I want to know how far up the tree of Mr. Murdoch's empire this goes.
The News of the World maintained that the phone hacking was instigated by a single rogue reporter acting alone, their royal correspondent Clive Goodman, who in 2007 was imprisoned for his actions. They consistently denied that others in its organisation knew about Mulcair and Goodman's activities, until, that is, Friday the 8th of April 2011, when News International issued this apology.
First, the denials that celebrity voicemail messages were listened to. Then the claim it was down to a single rogue reporter and his private investigator sidekick. Now the admission, we failed to uncover what was going on, we're going to apologise, we're going to pay up.
But so far, the paper has only admitted that the voicemails of 8 people were hacked. It's offered them up to £100,000 each as compensation, but for the dozens of others, including George Galloway, the fight remains to find out if their phone was hacked, and if so, who in the News of the World ordered it. George's lawyer remembers the paper's reaction when 2 people asked this question in 2008.
The 2 cases that we know about, Gordon Taylor and Max Clifford, went to the High Court to find out exactly what was going on. News Group settled both cases because they were being ordered to disclose all the material they had on this possible voicemail tapping.
To bolster their chances of getting answers, George and his lawyer have hired the barrister who successfully fought the first 2 cases to assess the strength of theirs and draft George's claim against the paper.
So, starting with the particulars of claim, the first paragraphs 1 to 12 really are specific to you, your political history, the sort of people that are calling you.
Yes.
Then we go on in paragraph 9 to give the judge some sort of feel for the activity on your mobile phone voicemail messages.
Routinely, I would be talking on my telephone to, very often, immigration officials in the Home Office.
Yes.
Because I had a very high immigration caseload. I was regularly receiving messages, making telephone calls to government ministers, members of parliament, senior officials in the Foreign Office. It's not just the quantum, in other words, it's the sensitivity of the kind of communications.
Yep. One has to pose the question, when someone leaves a voicemail for you, or when you leave a voicemail for someone else, do you expect it to be listened to by the person you've left it for, or by other people as well?
Mr. Mulcair carried out voicemail interception on an industrial scale. That's a very telling phrase.
And in terms of industrial scale, that largely comes out of freedom of information requests, and plus the sheer number of other names on the list and mobile phone numbers.
Documents seized contained the names or partial names of 4,332 people. That's industrial.
What isn't known is how many of those actually had their voicemails hacked by Glenn Mulcair.
Was he on the regular payroll or was he irregularly paid for storage, do we know?
There was a service contract. I think it was a yearly payment that's been reported. It was about $105,000 a year, and I would suspect that is actually a very large sum compared to the average News of the World journalist.
Yes,
in which case, one starts to think, well, why do you pay someone that much?
A six-figure sum? You must be getting something for your six-figure sum. I must say I thought that was extremely impressive.
Very useful and very impressive. He's really mastered it.
He's a very, very impressive guy. I think that this is headed for quite a titanic struggle, because I'm absolutely convinced that this goes right to the top, or as near the top as matters.
But News International, owners of the News of the World, maintained that the voicemail interceptions were isolated incidents unknown to senior people in the organisation, including the then editor, Andy Coulson. The breach to Danielle Lloyd's privacy also involves a mobile phone. In her case, what was stolen was just as personal as voicemail messages. Pictures of her breasts she wanted to keep private, which might seem odd, as Danielle has built her career on getting pictures of them into the media.
This is it, we're ready, and we'll just like do it in like... Yeah.
Go, go, go!
Oh my God, okay.
This is basically probably about 2 months worth of Danielle's press cutting, so you can probably see from here the amount of press that she garners. Danielle wins from getting the publicity which enables her to kind of further her career, and it's been proven via the sales of the newspapers and magazines that when Danielle appears on the cover, the sales of that publication increase dramatically. It's a win-win situation.
Except, of course, when the pictures are private ones. She involved the law when an employee of the Carphone Warehouse stole photographs from her mobile and attempted to sell them to the tabloids for £100,000.
It's not as though they were just photographs of a night out. They were private, personal photographs.
No, but it doesn't matter either way, like whether they were my photos, whether they were just like Joe Bloggs' photos. Nobody should have this photo stolen.
Danielle's publicist had a call from the News of the World who had alerted him to the fact that this particular guy had been touting around personal images of Danielle, which immediately sets off kind of warning signs.
Danielle's agent then rang her lawyer.
It's Jonathan Code about Danielle. Could you give me a bell when he comes off the phone?
Jonathan Code issued letters to all the national newspapers warning them against publication. The papers didn't publish, but issuing those legal letters means Danielle has a bill of £2,500.
If the Carphone Warehouse had written saying, we're really sorry, please allow us to cover all your professional fees, my guess is that would have been the end of it. As it was, what we got from the Carphone Warehouse was, this is not our problem. So in those circumstances, the law says that she should be compensated for that distress and for also the breach of her privacy, because the images in those photographs are ones which are intensely private.
They were in fact images featuring scars on Danielle's breasts after she'd gone through a cancer scare to remove a lump.
When the newspaper rang me up, I was devastated. I was like, what the hell? Like the whole of Fleet Street team, there was pictures on there of like my breasts and where I'd had like my scars from my operation, and I had a lump removed and I had a mole removed as well. So it was like really embarrassing. People like my friends, like celebrity friends and my mum and that, have been getting funny phone calls ever since. Like so obviously they've taken the numbers.
It's disgusting, isn't it? There was 4 big scars there, which obviously it was personal. No, it's an invasion of privacy.
People will probably think, you know, oh, well, why would she be bothered anyway? Because that's what she does for a living. To me, they're my private pictures, and whatever anybody says, you know, about my job or whatever, it's still wrong what they did, and I would never want them photographs to go out.
A big company name like Carphone Warehouse, you think you can trust that. You should be able to trust that company.
The The walls of George Galloway's house speak to his heroes, politicians who weren't afraid to take on powerful enemies. George has done the same when he's thought he's been wronged.
This is the occasion when Robert Maxwell ordered his men to piss all over me. I sued Mirror Group newspapers, and it cost them about £250,000. It reminds me that if you can muster the courage to take on powerful people, you can prevail. Ah, look who's the author, Alistair Campbell. Gosh, I'd forgotten that. Alistair Campbell. Who'd have thunk it?
10 years later, George was back in the High Court suing the Daily Telegraph.
The Daily Telegraph printed several pages over several days of false allegations about me in relation to Iraq, and I sued them. Saddam Hussein never gave me one thin dime, and it cost the Daily Telegraph £2.3 million.
I've said from the beginning, these documents are fake.
But the risk George took in suing the Telegraph was enormous.
Had I lost that case, it would have been me that was £2.3 million down and therefore bankrupt. I was ready to risk everything I have to be vindicated.
There's no question suing News International will also be costly.
The news group use a very expensive law firm who they share with the Queen of England, and so it's going to be a very expensive battle. And if it goes all the way to trial, it won't be a short law case. We're looking at least, I would say, 10 to 15 days in the High Court. And if you use a very rough average of around £10,000 per day, that's just the lawyers' bills, the barristers' bills for those 10 days will be exceeding £25,000, £30,000 easily.
Faced with costs like these, most claimants cannot risk pursuing a claim. But some lawyers, including George Galloway's, are prepared to operate on a CFA, a no-win, no-fee basis.
It's George Galloway for Dr. Farouk Bajwa, please.
But George will have to pay his barrister's costs, and if he loses, News International's legal costs will be over £250,000.
So we're trying to get him legal insurance to cover the exposure he'll have, because no case is ever a dead certainty in winning. And so he's going to have to get the legal insurance. Today, in the post, as we speak, we actually have received your insurance cover. Now this includes your barrister's costs, Jeremy's, all our costs and the other side's costs. So you're completely covered.
George's lawyer also decided to ask Max Clifford, who successfully settled his case, if he could help in theirs.
Did Max confirm the seven-figure nature of his settlement, or are you not at liberty to say?
He was cagey. All he said was that I taught Murdoch Group a lesson. He claims that he's managed to find out on whose orders and how many people were involved. And so I asked him whether he would help us in divulging that information, but unfortunately he wasn't willing. So that was a shame, because that was one of the main reasons.
Maybe covered by the confidentiality agreement that he's undoubtedly signed.
I suspect so.
I'm sure they didn't give him seven figures without a confidentiality agreement.
But George and his lawyer still have to establish that George's phone was actually hacked. The Carphone Warehouse still won't engage with Danielle's claim for an apology and compensation for the legal costs that kept her stolen private photographs out of the newspapers. To help move the case on, her lawyer, Jonathan Code, now wants Danielle to give a witness statement that he will send to the Carphone Warehouse.
Hi, Jonathan.
See you.
Was that you running up the stairs?
It was. Keeping me fit.
Trying to show up.
That's a legal document, and what Danielle says now could well end up being cross-examined in court if the case goes to trial.
We've got you going to the shop 2007. I know it's a fair long time ago. Do the best you can to remember. So you walk into the shop.
I was saying about, buying a new phone, but I wanted the data transferred from this phone to the new phone.
You leave your old phone and you've bought the new phone.
Yeah.
So you were acutely aware of the fact that there was a lot of information on the phone which you were keen to keep, didn't go anywhere that it shouldn't.
Yeah, especially like phone numbers and stuff. I would never just leave my phone with someone like that.
I imagine that given the kind of work that you do, there are a lot of quite what I might call valuable interesting telephone numbers on your phone.
To be honest, I didn't even think pictures didn't even cross my mind. Like at that point, I was more worried about the contacts in the phone. I'm very angry. You know, they're a big company. You know, I want justice, and they should be taking responsibility. So, however much I don't want to go to court, I will.
Okay, ladies, straight here.
Another concern for Danielle in this infringement of her privacy is that in today's internet world, the Carphone Warehouse employee could have let millions see her private pictures.
I mean, not only is Danielle in a situation where she doesn't know where these photographs have gone, for all she knows, half the population may see them. If someone decided to post them on the web, then that would be a very difficult problem to solve. And one of the things which is a reality is that there are finite degrees to which a defamation and privacy lawyer like me can control these situations.
But getting the seriousness of this across to the Carphone Warehouse is proving difficult.
What we got from the Carphone Warehouse was, this is not our problem. You know, this man is, to use the phrase, on a frolic of his own. And therefore it's for you to deal with it, and we wash our hands of it. And that's the difference between us.
In the 3 years since the phone hacking story broke, News International claimed it as the work of 2 rogue individuals, acting without the knowledge of the paper, its editor Andy Coulson, or its publisher. But last summer, the New York Times published a major investigation into phone hacking in Britain.
One of the striking things about this article is the sheer number of News International staff, including senior investigative reporters, who have, in some cases on the record, in other cases off the record, confirmed to the New York Times that these practices were rife in the newspaper, and they allege that the then editor, the ultra-competitive, very hands-on Andy Coulson, not only knew all about it, but instructed in some cases some of the named individuals in this article to commit illegal acts.
But Andy Coulson has consistently denied any knowledge. The News of the World said when the article was published, it relied on unsubstantiated allegations from unnamed sources on claims from disgruntled former employees. To get a British journalist's take on how phone hacking might have operated inside the News of the World, George decides to call on his closest friend who works for the Guardian newspaper, which has been at the forefront of investigations in Britain.
Yes. You've been in newspapers for 30 years. What is the likelihood of one person alone being involved in, knowing of such dark arts, and the editor having absolutely no knowledge of it?
I mean, of course, there's always room in any organisation for a wild card, a sort of loner playing their own game. But in this case, you've got to think, first of all, someone's got to sign off their expenses. They're paying these people, these private investigators, a lot of money to do this stuff. And how is that working without anyone else knowing? But then secondly, in any news organisation, reporters don't work on their own account alone without being supervised by their editors and their desk. It's silly, and also because the editors themselves, when the raw material is produced, when the news stories are produced, the first thing they're going to ask is, how did you get this? This is very good.
Yeah, because they've got to know it's copper-bottomed.
Yeah. What do you think the impact of the case will be if it goes well?
Well, if we get Rebecca Brooks, Andy Coulson, James Murdoch, who knows, even Rupert Murdoch, into court under oath, answering questions, that's a very serious position for them to be in.
George's lawyers, meanwhile, have been trying to get information from the Metropolitan Police. It was the Met who first broke the news to George that they had found his phone details in Glenn Mulcair's notebook. But now, 4 years later, they're resisting attempts to provide more details of any evidence they may have.
But essentially where we are is we're drawing blanks from the Met Police. They're not providing us with anything.
As far as the Metropolitan Police are concerned, there is that judicial review action which I explained to George as well yesterday. So I explained to him that what the judicial review was doing was that at least, I think, 3 or 4 people, including John Prescott and a few others,
and Sienna Miller's
and Sienna Miller have all joined in, saying they're asking the High Court to review the police's handling of the whole affair.
But the ICO are being more helpful. That's the Information Commission's office, so I think we should just stick with them. And they've confirmed, actually, that his name is on one of the documents.
They did?
Yeah. So his name appears at least once, and they said if you give us some more addresses for George...
we can do a further search.
We can do a further search. So we know there's something, and that justifies us making the court application. Which is good, I suppose, in a way.
It's helpful. I think it's helpful overall.
It is helpful.
Because that puts the Metropolitan Police under more pressure.
Danielle's lawyer now has a response from the Carphone Warehouse to the witness statement he sent them, but they are far from apologising.
They want to fight, and the way in which you communicate "I want to fight" in a legal claim is a big defence, and this is their defence, and is full of your case stinks for this and that reason, most of which I think is wrong, but they did have one interesting point in defence, which is that they're claiming that at the Harlow branch where Danielle went and got the data transferred, they don't actually do data transfer. I thought about this for a while and I thought, well, let's find out.
We've sent a couple of people up here already, and they've both confirmed that employees here, they are prepared to transfer details from one handset to another, and so we've come up here to confirm that. Basically, I've brought with me a dictaphone here. I mean, the fact is that if it's straight from the horse's mouth, then they're going to have less room to argue, really. So that's what the aim is, anyway.
A story about this claim. A spokesman for the Carphone Warehouse said in a statement today, "The download of customer content is entirely unacceptable and we can confirm that this content was not published." Well, you and I both know that the reason why it wasn't published is that you instructed me to take on all the newspapers and make sure that it wasn't published. Yeah. But this is where it gets really interesting. Their actions, and I think they mean the actions of the employee, are not indicative of our usual standard of service, and we absolutely apologise to Ms. Lloyd. Now, as you know, Daniel, how long have we been waiting for an apology from them about this?
A long time.
Yeah.
This has just made them look silly and stupid.
It is a complete contrast to what this document says, because what this document says is it's all down to you and it's nothing to do with us. So at some stage, we might be asking the Carphone Warehouse legal team whether this is their position or that is their position, because the two are completely different.
George Galloway and his legal team have been waiting to see what News International would say in their defence document, and at last it has come through.
there's nothing perhaps surprising in it. It's really a series of non-admissions. Saying, we don't think we did it, but we don't know.
So the phrase that's repeated throughout, is not admitted, doesn't mean that it is denied. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So they've not said, for example, we never targeted George Galloway and there were never any instructions given to carry out voicemail interception or anything of that nature. That brings us on to the private investigator, Mr. Mulcair's defence. He takes a slightly different line. He says, I'm not going to answer any of the allegations of wrongdoing because to do so would tend to incriminate me.
Jeremy has spotted what he thinks may be another telling piece of information about the private investigator, Mulcair.
He was convicted in January 07, so he probably got out of prison by June 07. Yet they're still paying him 80% of his £105,000 a year.
Industrial misconduct, instant dismissal, no payment would be the normal thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It is important to remember that when the other side say, this assertion you have made is not admitted, it's not the same thing as saying it's denied. So that plus the private investigators in American parlance taking the Fifth Amendment, refusing to answer on the grounds that to answer may personally incriminate him, they've left me feeling even more optimistic than I already was, and excited about the next stage, you know.
But George still hasn't got proof that his phone was hacked, and News International shows no inclination to settle.
If they said to me, you can have £1 million, that might be tempting, because I could do a lot with £1 million, not for myself, but for my work, you know. But I don't think they're going to offer me £1 million, so it's destined for court.
Despite the evidence that Danielle's lawyer sent to them that the branches of Carphone Warehouse do transfer data, the company still wants to fight and have actually come back with more questions.
They said that there are a number of matters on which they might want to make an application for specific disclosure, and that's an application for additional documentation. But mysteriously, they didn't say what it was. So I wrote back and said, well, if you want some additional documents, of course you can have them, but we can't give them to you till we know what they are. So they wrote back mysteriously again, saying nothing about what they are. So I wrote again, saying, look, we will send these documents, you know, if you tell us what they are. And then finally the mystery is solved. What they want are digital copies of the photographs that are the subject of this case. So within 2 hours, we stick them on a disc, and then their next complaint is, oh, well, the disc doesn't tell us when the photographs were taken or the equipment that the photographs were taken on. So, pausing there a minute, of course, the implication there is that both Danielle and her mum, who've given evidence about this, are lying about these photographs. You know, effectively, you know, the implication is that they've faked these photographs, which would be a serious contempt of court. And that's an extraordinary thing to suggest. If you actually look at the disc through the industry standard software, Adobe Photoshop, then you'll find this. There's the picture of Danielle. There is the notice which says that it was taken on the same BlackBerry mobile phone that she owns. And there is the date and the time, which tells you that it was taken in May 2007 at 4:09. I can't understand why, if they wanted to see the photographs, why they didn't ever ask for them. I still don't understand why. I mean, it would have been the first thing I would have done.
Danielle and her mother are frustrated that, as they see it, the case is stuck in arguments over irrelevant details, missing what is important about the invasion of Danielle's privacy.
What annoys me, because obviously people just make assumptions, don't they, because it says you've had your phone pinched with pictures on it. Well, explicit would mean to me like sexual ones, doesn't it? Clear
It's
your name.
embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
All them people in Fleet Street have seen all them pictures of me.
I know. I want to see a headline where it says, like, Danielle's won, and then you can give your own side of it to say, well, they were just pictures of yourself when you had your operation.
I just want it to be over with now and want them to admit what they've done is wrong.
Hi, Chloe, can we have the Galloway News International file? Can it be file 3, please? Thank you.
George wants to discuss with his lawyer what he might be offered as a settlement. The £1 million that Max Clifford allegedly got, or the £60,000 damages Max Mosley received when the News of the World infringed his privacy.
If I'm likely to get maximum in the court, 60,000, though I would argue that tapping a Member of Parliament's phone is more serious than breaching Max Mosley's privacy. I'm not interested in 60 or even 160, really. I'd rather sacrifice the 160 to get them in court.
Just to let you know, by the way, very recently, the date has been fixed for your trial. The bad news is, unfortunately, that the earliest date, believe it or not, for a 5 to 7 day trial is 23rd of January 2012.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
We were really surprised, actually.
We were shocked. I think we all know on a practical level that it's the disclosure application against NGN, which is the real trial in this.
Yes.
So that application we can make quite soon.
And we know that with the previous cases, it was at the disclosure stage when they started folding. So the sooner the better, really.
They must know, either because they know me or at least because they've heard my public pronouncements on this, that I'm not doing this for the money. Up to a point. I mean, if a ridiculous sum was offered, then obviously you have to think of your children and your grandchildren, but that point's quite a high point. So, assuming that high point never is reached, I'm more interested in them admitting liability, and I'd prefer if they had to do it in court.
George has arranged to meet Nick Davis, the Guardian journalist whose investigation into phone hacking has made him the expert on what has been happening inside News International.
I very much hope you will go all the way to court, because they never admit anything unless they're forced to. So it's going to come down to the strength of evidence that you've got. If the police came to you, it indicates not only that they found your name somewhere in the evidence that they were collecting, but they found it in a form which very strongly indicated that you had your voicemail intercepted.
We know they found my telephone number and they found my PIN number in the possession of Mulcair. One of the good things, helped by you and by the New York Times, is that there are now whistleblowers coming out of the woodwork. Do you think there might be any more of those to come?
If my private experience talking to people off the record was, if they were saying, look mate, you're screwing up here, you've got this wrong, I'd start to go very quiet and retreat. The opposite is the case. So then it's just a question of, as much as possible, bringing these people over the line so that they'll speak on the record.
Yeah.
You're the hound on the fox. The fact that the police came to you means there's something in there which was pretty powerful evidence. And as and when you get hold of that, and the court are going to back you. I mean, the police may well resist you, but you'll get disclosure. And once you've got that, you will have the News of the World in a much more defensive position.
But at this moment, George still doesn't know whether there is concrete evidence of actual hacking and whether the police have more than they have already shared with him. In Danielle's case, the Carphone Warehouse have moved to an offensive position.
We now see little point in entertaining any further correspondence with your firm at this particular stage. We've set out our client's position on a number of occasions, and we're now content to let the court determine matters. This is an application by the defendant to strike the whole claim out. They say that if you look at all the evidence, then this claim hasn't got a cat in hell's chance of getting off the ground, and that means that the court should exercise its discretion and bin it now. Part of the process of litigation is psychological warfare. They are trying to ramp up the risk to us of taking this action forward. They're trying to knock out Danielle's legal team.
Jonathan now has to attend a hearing at the High Court.
My best guess is that the reason they've made this application is to find out what our evidence is. Because to meet an application which says the claim is a bad one, then obviously you're going to have to put forward the evidence on which you say the claim is a good one. So that means that the other side will see our evidence earlier than they would otherwise do. Now, since the Carphone Warehouse isn't short of money, and that the downside to failing in this application is that you have to pay the costs of it, it's worth buying this evidence, which is effectively what I think they're doing.
It is a nervous moment because you're now going to be tested, and it's like going into the headmaster's study. You've done all your homework and he's going to decide whether you're right or wrong. You put on your tie. Yeah. Thanks very much.
It takes 6 hours of argument in front of the judge for Danielle's lawyer and barrister to discover whether her case will be thrown out.
Their application, if you'll recall, was to strike the whole claim out. Well, not only did the judge dismiss their application, he dismissed it with costs. He's made a big costs order against them, and he's also described the whole exercise as a complete waste of time and money. So it's a really comprehensive disposal of the claim.
What they say is, we don't understand your case, we need copies of the photographs. What you do is you write a letter. You don't spend, X tens of thousands of pounds on a great big fight about what turns out to be nothing. Just ask for the photos.
And that's exactly what the judge said. This looks like an attempt to avoid having to have a trial. And this was going to be the big buffer, that they were going to try and stop the progress of the claim. But the judge has said absolutely not. I think it was a 5-0 win, would you say?
I wasn't keeping count, but we won.
Yeah. We certainly did.
Now, one of the crazy things about this case is that if the Carphone Warehouse had simply written back to us saying, we're really sorry for what happened to your client, please just send us the bill for her legal costs for dealing with the newspapers, it would have cost them about 5,000 quid. Just this hearing has cost them about 50,000 quid. I mean, it's complete madness.
Perhaps stung by their failure in the High Court, a few days later the Carphone Warehouse send Jonathan a letter which seems to admit defeat.
In this letter, they write and invite us to engage in mediation. For the avoidance of doubt, and if appropriate, our client is also at that meeting happy to consider your client's entitlement to compensation. And that's the key sentence, which is code really for saying we're going to bring our checkbook.
In the 9 months that George Galloway has been pursuing his case, many other public figures have come forward to sue News International on the basis that their phones have been hacked.
My goodness, it's even more than I thought. Limbit Opic, I didn't know he was in the list.
But having been the first person of the current flurry of cases to start legal action, George now finds himself being bypassed by others with deeper pockets. The reason is that to access the data held by the Information Commission and the Metropolitan Police about the possible hacking of his phone, George has to go to the High Court with an application to force them to disclose. That legal step alone will cost him £13,000.
I'm annoyed at the police and especially the Information Commissioner, who is quite happy to give me the information but has to go through the ritual of opposing it, even though they know it has to be done. And why do I have to pay for it? Although I'm an insured person, I was then asked for £13,000 up front to pay for our counsel, the police's counsel, the Information Council, the court costs, and I didn't have £13,000 in cash. And so I've lost my place in the queue.
It's taken George another couple of months to pull together the £13,000 in cash he needs, but he wants to see his barrister before finally committing.
Good morning. Oh, what a front page. I overhear what you're saying. Brilliant.
People are being forced to pay good money, indeed a lot of money, to get documents from the police that one might have thought the police should have been shown to the victims of crime in the first place.
As one who has had to scramble, rather, to get the good money and lose time because of that scramble, I'm actually really angry about it.
It's odd, in a way, that they haven't as yet asked you to comment on documents, because one might have thought, given they've told you there's stuff there relating to you, one might have thought a detective would want to say, well, Mr. Galloway, did you receive a message of this nature? Does this mean anything to you?
Yes.
If you say no, they move on and find out who it does mean something to.
Yeah. The sheer scale of all this now, the tidal wave that News International is facing, does it mean that the newspaper is close to breaking point in the sense of, well, we can't defend all these cases?
NGN have suddenly found a whole cache of new emails and reportedly given 4 emails to the police. There's been no public statement as to what they contain, save to say that they're clearly sufficiently incriminating that on the back of that, News the World sacked Mr. Edmondson. He was senior. He was the news editor. So it goes pretty high. But NGN are not going to make anyone's life easy. Notwithstanding that their public stance is they are trying to, I think, root out all wrongful practices, they don't seem to be taking that stance in respect of civil claims being advanced against them. I think that we should take this course. We'll wait to see what we get, first and foremost, from the Metropolitan Police and press that as far as we can, because that is probably the best evidence of what we're going to get. Second best evidence will be pressing for disclosure from NGN.
The only way they can stop this court case is if they can persuade me to make an out-of-court settlement. There will be no settlement. This will go to court, and so it depends how long that process takes. We have begun it. They will have to answer it. And I think they know better than to come along with some grubby offer to me.
Well, usually, you know, I could be suing a newspaper for something like what they wrote, which was liable, but this is more a case of, you know, my property being stolen by a company, so this is a lot bigger.
It has taken another 3 months of negotiation for the Carphone Warehouse to finally agree compensation. They have offered Danielle £10,000 in damages, paid over £100,000 in costs, but even at the end there's a sting in the tail.
You know, you'd think that as a brand, the Carphone Warehouse would be saying, gosh, you know, if something awful happens to you at the hands of one of our employees when you've gone in to our shop to buy one of our phones and to get the data transferred, you'd think we're so sorry and of course we'll take responsibility for it, would be the best way forward, but absolutely not. Even right to the death, it's no, we deny liability. At the end of all this, they will eventually compensate her after we've been, you know, arguing with them for 18 months to do so. But what they won't do is accept that they should be responsible for the actions of their employee.
Carphone Warehouse maintain they do not accept any legal liability for an employee whose actions were at odds with their customer values and employee regulations. But Danielle is pleased she chose not just to give up.
If something like this happens to you, you've got to take action, even if it does take a long time, because you've got to show these people that, you know, they can't do that. And if they do it and get away with it once, they'll do it again. But it does shock me, and I'll never go into Carphone Warehouse again. And I don't think my boyfriend will either. Every time we go past Carphone Warehouse, he jokes about it. He's like, should we pop in? I'm like, no.
Thank you to everyone. Thanks to Jonathan and Ali and this team for
Well done.
Winning, thank you.
A victory lunch for Danielle. And would you believe her mother Jackie has had a problem with her BlackBerry phone, and her story seems surprisingly familiar.
Wasn't the manager. Ironically, I've been with the Carphone Warehouse now for 7 years, and I walked in and the guy said, well, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, I need to change the phone. And he took the old phone off me, and I said, can I just take the phone back? And he said, well, what do you want that for? And I said, well, I need to make sure everything is deleted from the phone. And he went, what do you think we're going to do, sell it to the newspapers? And I went, well, funnily enough, you should say that.